I live in a very old house. I'm talking old, old. It used to be split into two during the mid 1800s, and there was a railroad hub in my front yard. With history like that, deaths were bound to occur, and if what others thought were true, so were ghosts. Now, I'm not a particularly believing person when it comes to the paranormal. Usually, I can figure out a reason for any so called unexplainable thing that were to happen. But this one, I can't put my finger on it. My basement is unfinished. The walls are rocking and crumbling at the cement in between the cracks. The floor is practically made of mud, and the ceiling is only about 5 feet in height. It's freezing down there, and God forbid you don't wear shoes. You'll come up with black soles and probably a few slices on your heels. As terrible as it sounds, those aren't the issues at hand. Every single time I go down there, without fail, the door is open. There are two ways into my basement: the inside door, which is always locked, and the outside doors, which are two enormous, clunky metal ones, stuck together by the multi-decade-old dark green paint they're sloppily plastered over with. After going through the Bilco doors, there are a few steps and an old wooden one. If you can somehow manage to open the metal doors, the wooden one is locked from the inside with a slide latch. Locking this latch is no easy feat, mind you. It, similar to the doors, is plastered in grainy white paint older than me. Nobody goes down into the basement. It's cold, uncomfortable, and there really isn't anything important down there. But somehow, the door is just always open. I make jokes about it to my family, telling them every time they mention something paranormal, they should check that old wooden door in the basement and that long latch that consistently seems to reverse what we do to it. Typically, the door isn't completely wide open. It can be cracked or just a few feet, but it's never all the way. We go down there purely to check the status of the door latch, see the door open, close it, and leave. The most recent times the door's been opened, it's been more and more. As I said, it normally is just a few inches to a foot, but over the past couple weeks, it's been a lot more. It's been a lot more. The first week I checked, it was about 5 inches open. I closed it, latched it, and left. The second week it was about a foot. Still nothing too abnormal. I closed it, latched it, and left. The third week, however, it was about halfway open. This was unusual, but I didn't pay too much mind because the door opening is weird in itself. Who cares about the distance? I closed it, latched it, and left. The fourth and fifth weeks, though, they were off. The door was open to the wall both times. I got chills seeing it both times. There were no footprints in the dirt-covered floor. I didn't see any evidence of someone coming down here. It was the same damp, cold room I was used to, but the door was fully open. Both times. I closed it, latched it, and left. Every time I'd speak to someone about it, they'd ask me questions. All I could muster in response was, my basement door can't seem to stay closed. The sixth time I checked the door, it wasn't open, and it was still latched. I walked up to it to make sure, and yes, my eyes were correct. I started to walk away. I hit the third step up, and I heard something. A latch. The latch. My head whipped under the short ceiling and the banister my hand was sweatily gripping onto. The latch was undone. My eyes stayed locked onto the latch until I saw a crack forming in between the doorway and the door itself. A accompanied by a slow, slight, drawn-out creak of the door opening in front of my very own eyes. Goosebumps covered my arms and back. Every hair on my body stood on end as I witnessed what was behind the still opening door. The door finished opening while I was still frozen on the steps. Instead of seeing the usual 3 concrete steps going up toward the metal doors, I was faced with a small landing and a long staircase going down. It was steep and lit by dim lanterns placed every 60 feet or so. Part of me wanted to continue walking up and slam the door behind me, but the other part knew I had to look at the passage a little closer. My hand unstuck from the railing, and I ducked under the ceiling support beams and ducts to creep toward the doorway. My goosebumps remained, and my hair stood still. I felt itchy and uneasy. I waddled closer and closer until I reached the landing. I felt my blood run cold. This staircase was much farther down here than where I could see from before. What is down there? I quietly thought out loud to myself. My brain was riddled with questions. My body was filled with fear. The staircase was so dark, empty, unbelievably clean. I reached out and touched the walls. They were porous like limestone. The entire way down was the same color and poorly lit. I stepped onto the landing, and my heart filled with dread. I shouldn't go down, I pathetically attempted to convince myself. I took a step, followed by another and another. I continued walking down these stairs. It felt like the air around me was getting warmer. I kept taking steps closer to what I'd hoped was the end. I looked up behind me and could no longer see where I'd started, only the dark steps on both the ceiling and floor. I let out an exasperated sigh and continued walking. It couldn't have been less than 10 minutes until I thought I saw something at the bottom. The floor. I definitely saw a floor. I hurried down, being cautious as there was no railing for me to grab onto. The floor was getting closer, slightly brighter than the stones surrounding me in the stairwell. I saw some more light as I got closer until eventually I hit the bottom. There was something on the third to last step. I tripped and tumbled onto the floor. I had hurt my hand from the fall, but it was nothing serious. When I stood, I peered around the new room I landed in and soon noticed that it wasn't a new room at all. This was my basement, an exact replica of my basement, but it felt different. I couldn't place the difference immediately, but I quickly realized there was no staircase out, only the one I'd just come down. There was a vent close to the ground that I didn't recognize as well. I crouched and waddled towards it. It was thin, grated metal. I gazed through the small squares and attempted to pull on it, but it wouldn't budge. I backed away. While wandering around the rest of the room, I noticed a few more minor changes in what I knew as my basement. Some more odd vents, some spots that dipped down or the ceiling was higher, until I heard it. There was breathing. I couldn't hear it over my own, but in the brief gaps of my inhales and exhales, I heard another person breathing. I looked around for the source, but couldn't locate it. My brain told me to retrace my steps, so that's what I did. I slowly paced back to each abnormality, each vent, until I reached the first vent I saw. It was louder. I felt it hit the peach fuzz hairs on my face. It sped up, got more breathy, turned into more of a growl. I backed up and started crawling back to the stairs I came from, my hands getting all cut up on the ground. The growl turned into a whine, the whine into a deep rumble. When I finally reached the stairs and started crawling up them, the grate on the wall creaked into a loud crash, following by scurrying. Something just came out of that vent. Not even looking back, my crawl turned into a full-fledged sprint. I was not staying in this version of my basement. That thing was coming, and I didn't care whether I heard it or not. All I knew was I was getting out of this stairwell faster than I went in it. I kept sprinting. Faster, faster, faster. Fast. Okay. Now I'm slowing down. My legs were giving out. My head started to hurt. It wasn't slowing with me. It was catching up. But I could see the top now. Exhilaration took over. Adrenaline rushed through each and every vein in my body. Thankfully, I sped up. My heart was pounding out of my chest as I reached the top landing. That thing reached it not long after I did. Seconds after, actually. I slammed the door in its face and was met with pounding and cracking. It was going to get out, and I wouldn't be here for it. I ran up the second staircase out of the basement and into my house. Nobody was home. Once I slammed the entry door, I heard the thing in the basement break the wooden one. I hurried outside. And once I made it out of the house, I walked to the middle of my front yard to catch my breath. As I was looking back at my home, I saw it staring at me through the stained glass window of the front door. Its brown eyes, dark hair, pale skin. My heart sank as my eyes widened. Was I looking at me? Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. A quick shout out to my patrons: Melissa Perez, Lawrence Wallen, Eric Cifuentes, Jesse Hartley, Icy Narrates, Alonzo, Cupcake Hips, William Hartley, Rinku Star, Austin My Love, Mr. Sankofa, Seven Cities Journalist, and Ellie Hutmeyer. As usual, guys, I put a link to charity in the description. I'm going to keep it on the LA fires for a hot minute, but I will include other charities a little bit after. I understand that the fires are now no longer big news, but I would still like for the victims of the fires to receive help rebuilding their lives. And as I have been saying, even if that includes you unsubscribing from my Patreon for a while just so that you have something to donate to them, I highly encourage that, and I will not be offended. And as usual, feel free to reach out to me on any social media. Let me know how I can be praying for you, and I am more than happy to do that for you. God bless you guys, and I'll see you in the next video.